Hey everyone, it's Corey, and welcome back to Crafters Roundtable, the podcast where I get to sit down with individuals and learn more about their experiences and insights in this wonderful world of crafting. Today's guest has so many different things underneath her belt that she is bringing to the table to talk to us about, and I can't wait to start the conversation. But before we get started, please make sure you are subscribed to the podcast wherever you are watching or listening so you can stay up to date with everything going on here at the table. So pull up a chair, get comfortable, join me at the table, and welcome Allison to Crafters Roundtable. Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's nice to be here. I'm really excited.
Yay! I'm super excited that you are here with me today. To give the viewers a little bit of context, Allison and I met at QuiltCon this past year and immediately just connected and vibed and thought it would be a wonderful addition to have her at the round table with us. So I'm so excited that she could take some time out of her day to be with us. Before we get into kind of all the questions that I have for you, you told me that you had to run to the vet real quick with the tortoise. How's the tortoise?
He's fine. We've got a lot of their sulcata tortoises. They get really big.
Yeah.
This one's about 40 pounds right now, so about yay big.
Wow.
And they have a tendency to eat things they shouldn't eat. They like to eat rocks, and then sometimes they get a little backed up and need some medication for lack of a better explanation. But this one's done it before, and even though we clean our enclosures and we'll scrape them and drag the rocks, you can't watch them 24/7. They're outdoor animals, and they do
their thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You just do the best. You do the best you can and take care of them.
Yeah, we're going to get into the animal sanctuary that you have here a little bit later, but I do want to start off with, can you share about your overall journey with us from going from pharmacy, because I know you were a pharmacist,
yes, correct,
into kind of full-time long arming, craft entrepreneurship, and there's all these other things that you're doing. What inspired such a significant career shift?
Stress. Before I got into pharmacy, I worked in business for a long time, and I was in healthcare. I have 2 business degrees, and my dad is a pharmacist, and his dad was a pharmacist. My mother's worked in healthcare, so we've always been in healthcare. And I was trying to get out from under my student loans, and I was talking to my dad about pharmacy, and I decided to go back to school. So I became a pharmacist. I did that for about 20 years. And the last 2 years, my husband and I were going back and forth with just the amount of stress and just what it's doing to you physically and mentally, and trying to carry the load with all the animals and not feeling like you've got that personal time to unwind. And it was literally a 2-year discussion with, if I decide I want to do something crafty, which ended up being long arming, can we make it work? The biggest thing I think for a lot of people too is finance.
Mm-hmm.
You might not like your job, you might be stressed, but maybe at that point in your life, you can't do anything about it. So we finally got to the point where, like I said, it took a couple of years, and just sort of made the plunge. And it for anyone who's interested in starting their own business, kind of to go off on a little tangent, you need to make sure too, especially if it's home-based, the legalities. What kind of licensing do you need? Are you allowed to work from home? If you're in an HOA, do they let you have a home-based business? So while all of our discussions were going on, I was also practicing more on the long arm and making sure, can I do this? What does it cost to set up a business? And just, everything that goes into it. It's not a decision that we made lightly. And, without my husband, I couldn't have done it. Absolutely. So his support's been fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can totally understand the stress level from pharmacy. I don't know if you knew this. I worked in pharmacy as well. I was a pharmacy technician.
Okay.
Wasn't a pharmacist. My hat goes off to the pharmacist, but I was a pharmacy tech. And that is one of the most stressful environments I think I've been in. And I was in retail pharmacy too. And it was quite the ordeal every single day. So I can only imagine the other expectations and responsibilities that you had on your shoulder as a full-time pharmacist as well.
Yeah, and I started like most people, I started in retail and I did rotations in retail and hospital.
Right.
And when I finished pharmacy school, I did retail for a while and then I got into mail order, which was, in a big giant facility. And after a couple of years, I got to work from home. But you have to be like here at this time, do this much work, produce this much output and phones and trying to keep everybody happy. And I would agree. It's in pharmacy technicians who work retail. Hats off to them because you're the first contact with customers, and most of your customers are great. You meet
Yeah.
some wonderful people; they're friendly, but sometimes you get people who are, they're sick, they're frustrated, and
Right.
you take the brunt of it.
Yeah, no, it was quite the experience. Like you
Yeah.
said, I met some really great people, don't get me wrong, some lifelong friends, some lifelong connections. But there were those few that made me question, is this really the career path for me? And it was, obviously wasn't. I ended up, here in quilting, and I'm super, happy about that. And it looks like you have as well.
Yes.
So you describe yourself throughout like all of your different social medias and your website as like a lifelong crafter.
Mhm.
How like did you get into crafting, quilting, embroidery, sewing, or has it always kind of just been a passion of yours since the beginning?
Well, I can remember a couple things. Like I remember being honestly, I was probably 3 or 4 years old and being at the Y. We had like the YMCA,
Yeah.
and we always got to do arts and crafts. Like I remember we did one thing one day with foil, and we were like sculpting little people out of foil and things with clay and paint. And then as far as like stitching and needlework, I learned that from my mom. She used to make clothes when we were kids. I used to have, handmade clothes, and my doll would have a matching outfit. And she always did all different kinds of needlework, embroidery, crewel. She taught me latch hook. That's probably the first thing I remember starting with.
Yeah.
And she did something called Creative Circle in the 80s. It's sort of, if you think of like I don't know, makeup or Tupperware, that kind of thing. It was a party when people come over and you
Oh,
show them
gotcha.
the crafts. So she would give me, here's some extra, cross stitch floss. Here's a piece of fabric. And I remember just, taking the little squares and just sitting down and just stitching on it and just having fun with it.
Really? That's
Yeah.
that's super cool. And so, like, throughout, like, all of your different experiences, different jobs, different careers, as you've been going through into, to kinda your final thing today of being a long arm quilter, along with all the other things that you're doing, did you find that those kind of crafts, those crocheting, the needlework, all those different things, was, like, a really good stress reliever and, like, an escape from all the other craziness that was going on in your day-to-day life?
Honestly, it all kind of took a back seat. Like when I was in junior high, actually, when I was in junior high and high school,
Yeah.
I used to, now I know it's like quilty applique. I used to sew stuff on my clothes and fringe and patches and safety pins, and children are not nice to each other. I got just like relentlessly teased for those
Yeah. No,
things.
I know all about it. Yep. Yep.
And when I graduated high school, I wasn't sure what to do. So I went and I got business degrees and had to take student loans. So then I was working overtime, and any of the like crafting kind of took a back seat.
Yeah.
When I finally finished pharmacy school, one of the first things I picked up, and I don't do this so much anymore, was crochet. And I was crocheting the little anamaguri. Is that how you say it? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a Japanese name, and they're
Okay.
they're little animals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I've got like I didn't bring them here, but I've got
No
little
worries.
like crocheted fish, a hippo, a beaver. I bought, a kit with a book,
Right,
and I did
right.
that. And so I did that for a while, and that was fun. And then I started doing the cross stitch again. And I thought I'd really like to sew. And I brought something.
Okay.
So I had an old sewing machine in my closet that I would use, to fix clothes. And this kind of starts getting into the animals, and we have hedgehogs, and hedgehogs like snuggle sacks.
Oh, cute.
So, and this one's been washed. This one's several years old, and they crawl inside and they sleep in it. So I had to get my sewing machine out of the closet to make this. And
Wow.
that's when I realized the sewing machine I had, it was old, it was cheap, that even if I got it fixed up, I don't think I could have done much more than this.
Right.
But that's sort of what started me with, gosh, I really like sewing this. I grew
Yeah.
up thinking sewing machines are only for clothes and taking home ec and sewing clothes, and nothing ever fit. And I found it really frustrating.
Right.
And trying to find like the shade of green in the fabric and just forget it. So I started making these and I thought, well, this is fun. I should get a sewing machine. And I've always wanted to start quilting. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where the quilting began.
Cool. So you just mentioned to us that you've got hedgehogs and a few excuse me. A few minutes ago, I think I heard the canary down the hall.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to talk about the other part of basically your life, which is your business, the AZ Family Zoo,
Yeah.
Arizona Family Zoo. So it serves as a forever home animal sanctuary.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about like the different types of animals that you care for and how this whole like thing came about? Like, what was the idea that you wanted to start an animal sanctuary?
We actually call it our accidental animal sanctuary. There goes one of the dogs down the hall. I met my husband in 2009, and when we met, we each had a rescue dog. And that's kind of where it started, is that we both liked animals. And my dog at the time was very old and she passed away, and I wasn't ready to get another dog. So I got a hamster. I never had a hamster before. And I wanted something, but I wasn't ready to get another dog. But I didn't like being alone, not having an animal. And I thought I want something fuzzy. I've always had fish, like betta fish and goldfish. I'm like, so I'm
Right.
going to go get a hamster.
Okay.
So we go to I went to the pet store. I got a hamster. And then whenever I'd go to the pet store or we'd go together, at the times he still had his dog, to get dog food and he had a turtle, and to get supplies, they had a little, like a pop-up table in the front of this pet store where people could drop off animals they couldn't take care of anymore, pocket pets, hamsters, mice, anything small. So, go in to buy something, come home with a hamster.
All
And
right.
then they got to know us. And at one point, sorry, I've got a dog down here walking around. Here, come here, sweetie. I'll show you Libby. So this is Libby.
Oh, the baby.
Libby was part of a box of puppies that got dumped in the neighborhood of a friend. And like they split them up between the neighbors, and my friend who took it runs a pet sitting business. So she already had dogs all over and she couldn't take care of her. So we took in Libby and found out a few years later that she has epilepsy. So anyway, we try to keep her calm. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, hamsters.
Right.
So the people at the pet store got to know us, and they actually started calling when people would drop off pets. Can you take this? And my husband had a turtle, and then all of a sudden we had turtles, and then we had frogs. And then at one point we had 9 hamsters. And this was in our other house with a small kitchen. So the entire kitchen counter, because it was the only place to put them.
Right.
We had 9 hamster cages all along the kitchen counter.
Oh
Because
my
they have to be in their own cage unless they're same sex are raised together, then they'll fight.
Right.
And it just got to the point where it was word of mouth. And I started the AZ Family Zoo was the animal Instagram. I just came up with that name. And then people would see things on Instagram, and I'd get a message say, hey, are you in Arizona? Yeah. Well, can you take a fill in the blank?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's where it started. And we were in a smaller home in a different neighborhood, and we started taking in animals, and it started getting like everywhere else in the world. It's just getting built up and built up and built up, really congested with traffic. So we moved. We bought a larger home in an older neighborhood. It's on horse property, so there's more room.
Okay.
So now we have more room. So when people say, oh, hey, could you take or I've got a friend who's got and we sort of look at each other, do we have room for this? Yeah, okay, all right, we'll take it. And that it's our whole yard now. There's animals, it's like a zoo in the backyard. It really is. And sometimes people come over and they say, can I see your animal? Sure, you gotta be able to walk over hills and but that's how it all started. And we're almost to the point where in our backyard, there's really no more room. And we have so many of those giant tortoises that, there's the canary and they all need their own space, but we've got so many different kinds of animals now, and you just kind of learn as you go. We don't do, no snakes. I'm not doing snakes, and we can't do rabbits because the dogs chase rabbits.
Right.
Talk
to me about balancing the responsibilities of this full sanctuary that just kind of came to be, along with, you've got your whole long arm quilting business and like kind of figuring out how to kind of separate, I guess, the time for those, or is it just kind of all meshed together to make it work? Because that just seems like you've got a lot on your plate to do.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure the dog wasn't down there before I rolled the chair.
You're fine.
There is a lot to do. And that also did contribute partly to me leaving the pharmacy career, because even though I was working at home, you had certain times when you had to be on your computer and we have phone shifts,
Right.
and the doorbell would ring, the dogs would bark, or we'd have a sick animal. And I'd have to ask my boss, hey, instead of taking this shift, can I move it and take this shift? And at one point it was very flexible, but it became extremely inflexible, and it was causing a lot of stress with, like, normally I would take care of these animals, my husband takes care of these animals,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just getting to be too much.
Right.
So my husband, he has his own business, so he works out of the house. I'm home. Usually the only time I leave the house is to go to the vet. I'm here all the time.
Yeah.
But during the day, I take care of everything.
Okay.
If anything goes wrong, or, all the feedings and the outdoor animals schedule change with the seasons. And there are certain animals that I primarily take care of and that he primarily takes care of. And that's just
Right.
sort of come out over the years.
Right.
There are things that he's better at and things that I'm better at. And we've got a really big whiteboard in the kitchen where we keep track of. Yeah, I know.
I need to see this kitchen. There's a lot going on in the kitchen. You got a whiteboard. The house
Yeah.
before you had the hamsters. There's a
Hamsters,
lot
yeah.
going on.
Luckily now there's a hedgehog in the kitchen now. So actually, at one point we had 5 hedgehogs, and we were kind of out of room, and one of them lived in a big Tupperware tote, like a really big one, but on the kitchen table. So we didn't use the kitchen table. We were out of room, so the hedgehog got to live on the kitchen table.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's fine. But every day. Do you hear the canary?
Yeah, I hear the canary.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in the morning, I do certain things, he does certain things, and we just divide it up, and we're always checking with each other. In the morning or at night, did you do this? Do I need to do this? Or if he's got to leave early because he's got to drive to a clinic, he said, oh, I don't have time to feed the chickens this morning. Can you run out and feed the chickens? Yeah, okay, I'll go out and feed the chickens. And like today, we took our tortoise to the vet.
Right.
I went out and I did fed the potbelly pigs, fed the chickens, fed the early risers, because now it's starting to get light early and it's getting warmer. So certain turtles and tortoises are getting up earlier. Normally he'll do that in the morning before he goes to work. Before he goes to work. But since he took the tortoise to the vet, I checked with him and said, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'll update the board. And that's how we do it.
It's a full-on business.
It is. And
Yeah.
we are not a nonprofit. I've looked into making it a nonprofit, but there are certain legal requirements like public versus private, and you have to have so many people, you have to have a board. So we can't handle that. That's
Right. No,
thing that's going on.
Not taking anything else on.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool. So I want to shift gears over to kind of back into the crafting experiences that you've had. Thank you so much for talking us through the animal sanctuary. I think that's so incredibly cool. And for those that are looking to learn more about, I will make sure to put your Instagram handle down in the description so they can go and kind of watch what goes on in your animal sanctuary. So when you were learning all of these different, these techniques, these different processes that you've been building into your repertoire, have there been any like specific resources or like strategies that you've used to help learn new techniques? Because a lot of people, they'll like maybe want to get into jewelry making or want to get into crochet or cross stitch, and they're like, well, I don't really know where to start or where to look. Were there some places that like you were like, this is the place that really helped me?
Well, like when I made my first quilt, which is sitting over there, I watched several different quilting channels, and I just picked a little bit from each, because everybody makes things a little bit differently. And I would just try things. And the same thing with, if anybody wants to start cross stitch, there's a ton of cross stitch channels out there now. Same with like even knitting and crochet. You can go to YouTube and type in how to crochet and everything comes up.
Right.
I used to go to the bookstore a lot or go to the library, and I would pick up books, and I actually have a lot of books, some of them are older and I bought used, and it's
Right.
like, yay, I can crochet. And there's someone like smiling and holding something on the cover, you know.
Yeah.
So books are good. YouTube is very good for the machine embroidery and long arm. I did use YouTube, but a lot of stuff for the long arm is in the instruction book. And I know a
Yeah.
lot of times we don't read our instruction manuals, but yeah, exactly.
No words.
Yeah. Well, like the quilt behind you is dark and it's probably quilted with darker threads. So the first time I did a quilt on the long arm that has a black background and I wanted to use a black thread, I'm just like, this is just not going well. So I'm going through my manual and lo and behold, there it says in the manual, if you're quilting with dark thread, you need to pay extra attention to your tension.
Right.
I thought, okay, so I've been fussing with for how long? And there it is. I'm like, okay, I need to take this out again and sit down and read it again.
Right. So yeah, just having those kind of going back to kind of those basics of those things,
Yes.
that will help you kind of pull out all the different ideas and topics and all the other things. There's other words that I'm trying to add to this sentence, but I'm at a loss of them, which is very rare for me to be at a loss of words. But yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. YouTube is a great resource for all sorts of different things. But then I liked your earlier comment that you mentioned picking up bits and pieces from each different instructor, or each different video, or each different class. Because as a teacher myself, I always say there's no rules in quilting at all. There's no rules in sewing. There's no rules in embroidery. There might be different ways to do it, but you can pick up different things from everybody and kind of build your own book of this is how I like to do quilting and go for it.
Exactly.
Which is the best way and the most fun way to stay into it. So you mentioned earlier that you also do long arm quilting services.
Mhm.
So for those that are kind of unfamiliar, can you explain kind of how your long arm quilting service works? Like, is it like an online thing that someone fills out a form? Does someone contact you? Are you accepting new customers? Kind of how does that work?
Oh, yeah. I have a few regular customers, and like I said before, I generally don't leave the house. So as far as like interacting with people and trying to do marketing and outreach, I'm a little restricted to what I can do in social media and things.
Hmm.
But people can drop quilts off. I have people who drop quilts off. I have a couple people who've mailed me their quilts. The information is on my website, which is azfamilyzoo.com. And I have a quilt gallery that has pictures of my quilts, and then a long arm quilting section where people can print off questions, information, pricing, and people can email me and
Yeah.
ask me.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I think everyone's always looking for long arm quilters in their area. So that's really good that you have that option available for them, because I know we've got a lot of listeners in Arizona, and I think in around your region as well. So this is awesome. But like you said, people ship things to you too. So they can ship
Yes.
from wherever they
Mhm.
want and learn more about your services on your website. So I'll have your website linked in the description below. Another thing that you mentioned was you started an Etsy shop, you said in 2019?
Yeah.
2019. So, and a big thing about your Etsy shop that I was reading was a lot of the proceeds go towards fundraising for your animal sanctuary.
Mhm.
So, kind of what inspired you to combine your kind of love for business from all your degrees into your Etsy shop, into then shifting proceeds to that animal sanctuary for these animals? I think that's a really incredible story that maybe I want to learn more about, but I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more about too.
Well, when I started the Etsy shop, I was posting some of the my crafts on my animal Instagram, and people said, yeah, that's neat. I'd like to buy it. And I thought it would be a neat way to make something that people could buy to help the animals. Since we're not a nonprofit, sometimes people would say, can we send you a donation? We're like,
Mm,
well, and I do have a donate button on my website if people want to donate, but we're kind of like, we don't necessarily feel comfortable soliciting a donation since we're not a nonprofit.
right.
So the idea that people liked and enjoyed some of my crafts, I thought, well, this is great. We're both working. Let's take that money and put it to the animals. And
Right.
to be honest with you, my Etsy shop does not make very much money. And
Right.
there's no question that it all goes to the animals, because that's where all of our money goes. Like, we don't travel, we don't go out to eat. I think I've been out to eat like twice since COVID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we don't. We
Yeah.
cook at home. We stay at home. We don't travel. We're kind of homebodies. So our money goes, to the
To
animals.
help the animals.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you're I don't wanna say sacrificing experiences for yourself, but you're giving back to a much greater cause that, like, I don't even think we're all even, like, capable of comprehending. Like, giving back to those animals to give them a better life is absolutely incredible but, and then you're also kind of, like, just taking a step back from doing other things to be able to do that, and that's certainly something that is to be commended, so, like,
Mm,
hats off to you. Thank you for everything that you do. Because
yeah.
I love the animals except for the snakes. Sorry, not for
Yeah.
me. Like you
I'm
said,
not
we
a
talked about that
snake.
earlier, not the
Yeah.
snakes.
No.
But I love the animals. When I was in Australia, I made it a point to go to the zoo. I know it's probably a whole nother topic on certain levels, but like
Yeah.
I think that's really, really cool. And like that's amazing that you do that.
Oh, thanks. It's just for us, it's almost like no question.
Yeah.
We both just really love the animals, and if we can help them, we do.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate enough to, have the means to be able to do that, and not a lot of people can do that, or maybe they get a pet and don't realize that what like the tortoise that they bought in the pet store, and I put some of this on the pet stores, they're itty bitty and they're cute. 5 years from now, it's the size of a football and is digging holes in your yard. And then
Right.
in 10 years, it's that big and it's digging an 8-foot tunnel in your yard. I don't
Right.
think people understand sometimes what they're getting into.
Yeah. As that goes, and like you said, some of that is on the pet stores too, because
Yeah.
it looks all great and dandy when they're little babies, and that's great. But they're also, you know,
Yeah,
living and breathing and have a life to live as well,
exactly. Yeah.
and going up from there. Now, you mentioned before that one of your biggest kind of things that you were looking for or looking towards when you were learning more was YouTube.
Mhm.
And I know that you have a YouTube channel
Yep.
as well. So you maintain a YouTube channel and it's called Miss, and I have it written down so I'm right, Mrs. AZ Family Zoo Stitches.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I got that right. Where you're sharing all sorts of different tutorials and insights about cross stitch, quilting, other crafts. Like, what motivated you to start this channel and teach others along with all of the other things that you're doing as well?
I know that like bored is not a word you ever hear in our household. It's bored or relax.
Right.
It's like it doesn't happen. But when I was doing the like with cross stitching, I tend to do that at night before bed.
Mhm,
And I was watching, they're called floss tube channels.
mhm.
And generally it's dedicated to cross stitching. So I had been watching those for a few years, and I wanted to get into YouTube, but I wasn't sure, do I want to start with cross stitched or do I want to start with quilting? How do I want to start this?
Right.
So, since I was more familiar with how floss tubes run, they sort of have a format. These are my work in projects. This is what I finished. This is what I fully finished. Here's what I bought. Here's what, they all kind of sort of have it almost comes with a layout.
Mhm.
And I thought that's a good place for me to start because I know what people expect. And then I can learn how to work with YouTube and then grow the channel. And I've been able to start growing the channel more, since I left my pharmacy job. And I'll ask people because primarily it's been cross stitch, and I'll say, hey, but I always share everything I do. I start and I show my cross stitch and my floss tube, and now I'm doing punch needle, and
Right.
I'm working on this quilt. I did this quilt. Here's my Barn Star sampler. Here's the fabric. This is what I'm doing. And I ask people, I get feedback. I get feedback on the YouTube channel or through Instagram. I've brought up a couple times, said I'd like to start showing quilting and embroidery and everything. Should I put it on a separate channel? Should I keep it on this channel? And overwhelmingly, people have said keep it on the same channel.
Yeah.
So now I'm starting to set up playlists. So when people
Yes.
go to the home screen, I've got something to say about playlists though. But when people go to the home screen, everything will be divided. Yeah, what I've learned about playlists
I was
is,
about to say, do tell. Please
yeah,
share
yeah,
the deets.
at
Spill
least
the tea.
what's happened for me when you publish a video, it just goes into the videos section,
Mhm.
right? It's there. If I move it or add it to a playlist close to the point when I publish it, my views do this. So I found that for me, I like to let it sit
Hmm.
before I move it to a playlist. So if you look at my channel right now, I have a section for machine embroidery and rope bowls, but there's still things that are, especially machine embroidery, they're just in the general video section because I
Hmm.
just put them out this week,
Hmm.
because I've done this with floss tubes. When I add it to the playlist, I don't know what the algorithm does, but it does something, and it's almost like it gets buried.
Right.
So what I like to do now is maybe let things sit for 3 to 4 weeks and then move it to the playlist,
What a
because by
great tip.
then that initial bump is starting to go down,
Right.
and it's still there under your general videos and under the playlist, but there, I don't know what it is, because I've done it a few times where I published a floss tube and immediately put it on the playlist. Like 10 people have watched this in 24 hours. What's going on? What's the problem? And then take it
Right.
off the playlist, and then, oh, okay, now 100 people have seen it.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
It's algorithms on every single app are
I hate
impossible to
algorithms.
master because
Yes.
they change every day. And the second you think you've got it, it flips. And it's just
Yes.
like, all right, well, that was fun trying to, wasted a week figuring out this algorithm for it to change. But it's fine. Everything's fine. I've got
Yeah.
nothing else better to do. I'm bored, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You,
let's work on the next one.
yes, and I'll what's interesting too is I'll get feedback now from I chat with people on Instagram and YouTube and other like floss tubers, and
Yeah.
sometimes somebody will send me a message and says, you know, have you noticed nobody's watching the videos lately? Like maybe there's someone who normally gets 500 views and they put out a video and they've got 150, and I'll say, yeah, that happened to me too. Something happened,
Hmm.
and you don't know what it is because YouTube doesn't tell you what it
No,
is.
they're not
It's
going to tell you. They don't tell you anything. They
no,
just
yeah,
do their thing. Uh,
exactly, yeah.
so, when we were chatting via email a couple days ago, you had brought up the new part of the affiliate with
Mhm.
Kimberbell. Can you kind of talk me through like why that was? I hate to say why'd you go with Kimberbell, but like why did you go with Kimberbell? Like, is there something about like the products that you like more? Are there certain products in their lineup that you like really help with what you're doing? Because I think it's interesting to learn like why people like certain brands because you
Right.
can be very passionate about it.
I've been doing the Kimberbell products. I've got stuff over here. I've got
Yeah.
tons of stuff everywhere. Um, like 2022, I started this machine embroidery quilt, and I got really busy. I'm still working on finishing it,
Okay.
but I've done a lot of their smaller projects, and I've always liked their stuff.
Okay.
And last year, I started doing punch needle, and I started with a different brand, and I've discussed it on my floss tube. And it was just something that it didn't work for me. Like I bought all the supplies, like the special cloth, the hoop,
Uh-huh.
the yarn, the punch,
All the
and I was
things.
really frustrated with it. And I was having just a really hard time. And I've always done Kimberbell, and by coincidence, Kimberbell launched Punch Needle. And I thought, oh, well, I'm familiar with their products. They have great instructions. I'm happy with it. I'm going to order some punch needle kits.
Okay.
And so I started doing the punch needle, and I love their kits. And I'm saying this, even if they say, okay, well, you're not producing enough as an affiliate,
Right. Right.
I really love their punch needle kits. So I started posting them,
Okay.
and I would show them during my floss tube, and they're very responsive on Instagram if you post and tag. So I just sent them a message on Instagram, said, hey, I just thought I'd let you know I'm showing your punch needle on my YouTube channel. Here's the link to the video. Here's the timestamp so they
Uh-huh.
could look at it.
Right.
And I just started chatting with their person in social media. And she asked me, well, do you think you might be interested in doing this? And I was like, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
stuff that I would be buying or using
Oh,
anyway.
yeah, and it's stuff that, like, you're super passionate about, and that's what
Yeah.
makes it more fun, like, when it's not a forced, like, sell,
Yes.
even though you're not really even selling it, but, like, it's not when it's
Right.
not forced, like, it's just naturally something that you love, it makes it so much easier for a viewer or a user or, like, a watcher
Yeah.
to ingest that information, like Aliso irons. I'm
Yep.
obsessed with Aliso irons, I work with them very closely now, but I didn't. I just really liked the product, so
Yes.
it worked. It was a natural pairing and a great relationship. But when it's something that you truly care about, like you said a second ago, like even if I don't produce enough sales for them, whoop de doo, I'm still going to use the products because I really, really love them.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's what it is. So it's something that regardless, I would be buying, using, making a video,
Right.
posting. The big difference I would say is when you enter, a contract or an agreement is, like I said, we were talking about priorities.
Hmm.
So if they say, okay, well, we're launching these kits, we're going to mail you this. I want you to do X, Y, and Z with it. Well, then that goes,
Right.
to the front of the line. So
Yeah.
you have to be okay with your hobby being part of your business and putting deadlines on your hobby versus just having, your stash and stack of products that you'll get to when you want to get to it. You
Right.
have to be able to be comfortable with doing things when somebody says, I really need this done.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely something to think about for anyone that's listening or watching that is like considering becoming an affiliate for a certain brand. Like we have an
Yeah.
affiliate program here at Linda's. And it's like, it's one of those things that you do have to put that, not pressure on yourself, but you've got to structure yourself. That's a better word. Structure yourself
Yes.
to say, okay, I'm going to get this done because I entered into a contract to get it done.
Yeah.
It's still fun and it's still a great time, but it's still something you've got to really watch yourself because, like you mentioned, sometimes our hobbies we can set them up. I've got a quilt right up there. I'm looking at it right now. I've got a
Yeah.
quilt sitting there since about 2017. I'll
Yeah.
get to it. I'm gonna get to it. I'll
Yeah.
work on it.
Exactly.
And it's some of those things, especially when you're entered into certain contracts and conversations, you've got to get them done, whether you want to put it on the shelf or not. It's got to get done.
Right.
So definitely something to look into. Another thing that I was reading on your website, because I do a deep dive when I bring on guests because I want to get everything I can out of it for everyone that's listening. In addition to the crafting, the quilting, the cross stitch, the embroidery, the animal sanctuary, the animal care, the canary, the hamsters, the hedgehogs, all those different things. You also design and maintain websites.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Ho how did you, like, come about, like, acquiring these web development skills? Because this is, like, a whole 'nother part. I mean, it's great for business,
right.
like, but normally you hire someone off to do this, but you're doing this as well. So talk me through because I maintain our website here.
Okay.
Talk to me about, like, how did that come about? Like, how'd you get into it?
Well, when I started, the first thing I did was the animal Instagram. Now I've had my animal Instagram now, I think, for 8 or 9 years.
Mhm,
And I wanted to start a blog a few years after I did the animal Instagram. So
mhm,
I thought, okay, well, I know I need, because I've worked in business, I've worked in offices, I worked around computers. I know I need to register a domain name.
mhm.
And I called the web hosting company because some of these things you can do for free. So if you want to get started, you can look for those free hosting services.
Right.
So that's kind of where I started. Can I say a company name? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, because their local actually is GoDaddy.
Oh,
GoDaddy is
yeah,
here
yeah.
in Arizona. Yeah.
Mhm.
And my mom had worked with GoDaddy through her business. So she was a little familiar with it. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to call them.
Okay.
And I called them and I started with, well, I just want like a splash page and a blog.
Mhm.
So a homepage and a blog. So we set up with, it's called WordPress, and
Yep.
that's what I started with. And you pay the fee, you have to pay every year to keep your domain name registered.
Mhm.
And there are templates. So here's your template. You replace your pictures, you change the fonts, you change the colors. Many years ago, I took a course on HTML coding, and that was one of those things that I learned that, yes, if I put the time in, I can do, but I really have no interest in, like,
It's a lot of work. I
yes.
do a lot of HTML coding
Oh,
here, and it's a ton of work.
yes. Yeah. I was just not going. And I ended up using something called Microsoft Front Page to
Oh,
help me
yeah. Yep, yep,
because
yep.
it would build the coding for you in the back. And this was a community college course that I took many years ago.
Right,
But technology is so much further now that you can build and maintain your website without knowing any kind of coding
right.
at all. So I started with just the splash page and the blog, and then it just kind of got bigger to where I wanted to add an information page. And now I'm looking at a business, and my husband's like, "Oh, well, you're dealing with websites. I've got a website. We're paying somebody to maintain it, but we really don't do a lot with it. Can you look at mine?" And his was on GoDaddy.
Okay.
Okay, so I start looking at it, and he says, "I want to do, this, and this." And I say, "Okay, well, I can't figure it out.
Right.
I just call GoDaddy." And sometimes you have to pay like website marketing services, and they'll get somebody on the phone and they teach you how to do it, or they'll send you, here's video links.
Mhm.
Watch these. This is how you do it. So everything is just self-taught. So he has two businesses. I
Okay.
completely built his second website. I did start with a template, but the end product looks absolutely nothing like what is
Never
online.
does. Yeah, never does.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it's just learning by necessity.
Yeah.
And like him being too busy to find somebody else to do it. He's like, well, you're at home. Can you do this? So I was like, okay, sure.
I've got nothing else going on, honey. It's fine. Totally. I'm
I'll,
bored,
I'll be
like
happy
you
to.
said.
Well, and a few months ago, they had some changes in who does what in his office,
Yeah.
and they had a dedicated like front desk person, and they went to something else.
Mhm.
And he asked me, says, if I bring some stuff home, can you do this? Sure, okay,
Yeah,
you know,
give it a shot. Why not?
yeah. So I do work for him too, as well.
Oh my god, you're doing so like, how did you even find time to leave to come to QuiltCon?
That was a vacation day for me, honestly. It was. I had to set up with him. I said, I want to go. I need you. Like he likes to ride his bike in the morning and go
Okay,
for a bike ride. So I need you to shorten your bike ride. You have to be home because the dog with epilepsy, who now is on the couch behind me,
right.
has to have 24/7 care in case she has a seizure. Because if she's on a couch or sitting on a bed and she starts to have a seizure, the danger isn't necessarily the seizure, it's falling
Falling
off
from
the
the
furniture,
yeah,
or yeah, or even if she's just walking around the tile floor, which has happened before, and she starts to have a seizure and she'll fall over. So
right,
you need to, put your hand under her head, and you need to keep the other two dogs away. They won't attack her, but they want to see, what's
right.
going on. But
They wanna be in the business, yeah,
yes. So for me to that's why I hardly ever leave the house.
yeah,
So for me to go somewhere, we had to arrange for him to be here. And then I went on opening day. And then
yes,
I came back again. That was Thursday. And I came back again on Saturday.
yeah,
So it was again me asking him, hey, can you please be home? And I went for like the first half of the day.
yeah,
So can you be home for this? And then, as soon as I got home, he's like, I gotta do some stuff. I gotta leave the house. He does like the grocery shopping and stuff. He's
all
like, I
the
gotta
things,
run to the
yeah.
store. I gotta go to the hardware store. So it's like as soon as I get home, he's like, okay, I'm going out. I'm like, all right, bye. Nice to see you. So
Good t transfer of power at that point. It's like, "All right, now you're in
yeah.
charge, I gotta go."
Yeah, somebody is always here, and if we're ever in a bind,
Yeah,
my parents have come and helped out on occasion, but normally we can juggle it between the two of us.
it's incredible, that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
as you, like, reflect on your journey, what have been maybe some challenges, that y'all have faced when you're, like, transitioning from that traditional corporate-based career, like pharmacy, into, managing these multiple entrepreneurial ventures, that you're in, and, like, how have you overcome those challenges?
Well, the biggest one that still, even though we prepared for it financially, is mentally dealing with I'm not getting a regular paycheck,
Mhm,
and kind of a little bit of panic about
mhm,
that.
mhm,
Even though, we've planned, we've paid things off, been like for I started putting away for retirement when I was very, very young and
right,
saving. And so if there's anyone young out there, start young. It'll help you when you're older. Even with all the planning and like sitting down and going through the bills, and here's what the animals are costing, here's like our food, electric, and all this,
mhm,
I still kind of struggle with it. And a pharmacist has a decent income, even part
right,
time. You had, because I transitioned, I went full time, and then I gradually went to part time. And then when it got to the point when I could no longer work with my employer, even with the part time, and I had zero flexibility, that's kind of when we were sort of pushed over the edge.
right,
Um, you get used to it, and even though nothing is absolutely secure, no job is 100% secure. It's, for me, that security, I still kind of like, if I see a quilt kit or something, I think, okay, am I gonna make this right now, or is it going in my closets?
right,
So I find that I'm buying a lot less.
mhm.
um, when, and in fact, it's kind of funny, a little bit of a tangent, but when I was working and I was stressed all the time, I did a lot of, they call it dopamine shopping. You
Oh, honey,
retail
let me
therapy.
tell you about
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
mhm.
I've had a hard day. I'm watching, I'm closing out my day. I put on YouTube, I'm watching, oh, look at that new fabric line. Okay, well, I'm just gonna go buy that fat quarter bundle or that half yard bundle.
Mhm.
So I would always kind of laugh because I would tell people, I'm not hoarding. I'm curating a collection for my retirement.
Fair.
That's that.
That is a beautiful statement. We're making shirts for the next QuiltCon. We're doing it.
Yeah, there you go. You're curating your collection, and it's turned out really well because if now I have plenty to do. I don't necessarily need to go buy the latest and greatest. Fabric colors and trends, they do change, but a lot of them, it takes a long time for those colors to change.
Right.
If you like a certain designer, all their lines usually mix together.
Mhm.
And if I have a long arm customer says, hey, I don't have backing for this, I actually have probably about 10 bolts I'll watch. And when they go on sale, so like I have white, off-white, gray, navy, black, a couple of
Right.
shades of pink and blue. I can send them a picture. I've got this, I bought it at this price. I know this much per yard. Most of the times, and I probably shouldn't say this, but most of the time I do even Stevens.
Okay.
I'll figure out, I ended up, this bolt cost me $7 a yard. And I'll tell them, okay, I bought it on sale. I paid $7 a yard. You pay me $7 a yard. And for my time, if you need me to piece your backing, if I have time to do that,
Right.
then I'll do that. I sort of lost track. Did I answer your question?
You did. No, yeah, you did, because I can totally understand kind of what you're understand. Maybe that's something I can see the point because I haven't gone through that yet. But like
Mhm.
even like my mom and I, we sit down regularly. She's even though she's retired, she's still here every day in my studio when she's not traveling. And
Mhm.
she tells me that is still the biggest thing for her from transitioning now into retirement was going from not having a regular steady paycheck. Like she and my stepdad, they're very frugal people. Like they are like on top of everything
Yep.
all the time. But she said it's still a constant mind game to get over the fact that you're not seeing that check hit every other week.
Yes.
It's not, or however you get paid, once a month, every other week, weekly. It's
Yes.
different because you're not seeing that those numbers go up. They just kind of keep going down.
Yeah.
And so she said that's the hardest thing. So like listening to your story, I can totally see more of her point of view because I mean, it is true. You're used to that, and it's it's that safety net basically. Even though you've prepared as much as you can,
Mhm.
it's kind of interesting to get over. So I think it's nice for others to hear your point of view as well because there might be a few people listening that are struggling with getting over that, and
Yeah.
it's going to be okay. You just kind of figure out where you want to shift your money that time. But I think you hit the nail on the head though that a lot of the fabrics, like yes, you want to get the latest and greatest trending things, but you'll start to see even some things in your stash or even in that curated collection that you have, some of those colors start to come back on trend.
Yeah.
So some of that fabric that you have is it's not a new pattern, but it's on trend with the colors and it could look almost like a brand new thing, which
Yeah.
I think is kind of cool how those things work. So for anyone that is interested, I always like asking this question. For anyone that's interested in starting their own business, turning their hobby into a business, like what's like the key advice that you would give someone that's navigating into that arena of hobby to business?
Well, one of the things for me was, and this, you're obviously much younger than me, but as you get older, you really start thinking about where am I putting my time and my energy? And you only live once, and you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to put this off. I'm going to do this when I'm retired. I'm going to do this when I'm retired. You start thinking, well, if I keep working the job that I'm working now and I wait until I'm retired, I'm going to be too tired to do anything. And it's not going to happen at all. It
Right?
would never happen. So, try and think about, first finance,
Yeah.
make sure all your ducks are in a row, legalities and that kind of thing. But as far as turning like a hobby into a business,
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing is, are you okay with your hobby or you can call it a passion, desire, whatever you want to call it, needing to be scheduled? You
Mhm.
have to be able to, especially if you're in charge of yourself, set priorities, and you need to be able to say no, which I think is something a lot of people struggle
Woo!
with, because people will say, can you do this? Like I've had people ask me, can you make me a t-shirt quilt if I bring you a pile of t-shirts?
Mhm.
Yes, but no, I don't do that.
Right.
It is something that I know how much time that's going to take,
Right.
and it's going to take away from other things. And it's like crochet or knitting. It's something that I maybe enjoy, but I don't want to do all the time. And
Right.
so knowing what you really enjoy, where you want to put your energy, and yeah, learning to say no is big. And one that honestly I still kind of struggle with is like thinking of yourself as a professional and charging appropriately for your services.
Mm-hmm.
So do your market research. What are people for long arming? What are people charging per square inch? And you say, okay, well, it looks like the going rate is anywhere from like this many cents to this many cents per square inch. And you think, well, I'm kind of new.
Yeah.
I'm not, well, you know what? You need to charge it. You're
Yeah.
putting in your time. Before I started doing this professionally, actually, one of the biggest things that helped me kind of gear up to get ready for it was I had, I think, 14 unfinished quilt tops. And the reason they were sewn, but they weren't quilted. And
Wow.
part of the
Yep.
reason was because my long arm had a problem with the tablet, and I had to send the tablet back. And right at the same time, Pro Stitcher did a big update to their software. So everybody was getting new tablets.
Right.
So I had to wait. And when I finally got my new tablet, something was wrong that had to go back. They had to send me a second one. So while this is going on, I thought, well, I'll just keep quilting.
Right. Right.
So, by the time I got that up and running, I had this huge stack, and I thought, well, this is great. This is practice for me. I'm going to
Right.
get all this quilted. And I did. It took me a year to finish
Yeah.
it all. And even though, I did that, which was great, I learned a lot by doing that many.
Yeah.
You probably still will never feel ready. If you think, okay, well, maybe, you know what, I'm going to do this next year. I'll feel more comfortable next year. Well, next year is going to come and you're still going to be like, well, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm as
Mm-hmm.
good as so-and-so. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
not, you need to, yeah, those are the three big ones. Like, say no, charge for your services, and you will never feel ready.
No,
You
I think
just have to start.
I think that's like extremely good advice. One of my really good mentors. I think I have a piece of knowledge from every single one that you just threw in. Your first one for learning how to say no. One of my really good mentors in my life. Her name is Joanne Knight. She always told me, Corey, no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. Sometimes there are some things that you have to be comfortable saying no because it's going to add more stress to take it on and take away from what you're actually working on than the overall output of that original project is actually going to give.
Right.
Um, and I think charging for your services, I hear a lot that, for especially for new long armors that are getting into it. I was, speaking with a lady years ago, and we were chatting about pricing for long arm quilting services. And I was like, so what are you charging? She's like, oh, I don't quilt yet for the public. I'm still new, but I want to quilt for the public. And I said, well, how long have you been quilting? And she's like, well, I've had my long arm for 5 years. I said, no, you're not new. You're not new
Yeah.
anymore. No, new is like 6 months. You're not new. You've got this. You're a confident quilter. You can definitely charge what you need to charge, and not being apologetic about charging what you need to charge, because it does take a lot of time to do all of this stuff.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Which is really good. So excellent advice. Thank you so much for adding those little key points in. Um, the last thing I've got is, as we're looking forward, what does future Allison see for all of your crafting endeavors, this animal sanctuary? Kind of, where would you like to see everything go for the future?
Gosh, that's a loaded question,
It
isn't
is a
it?
loaded question.
Yeah.
Yep, always
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. As far as the animals, that's something my husband and I decide together. And we've actually decided we are not taking in as many as we were. We're
Mhm.
at about 50 animals, and that's excluding the fish pond, which actually we did take in some fish this weekend.
Wow.
Believe it or not, somebody was like draining their fish pond and posted, hey, I need to get rid of these fish. So we went and grabbed some fish.
Yeah.
But,
Time.
but yeah, we're getting older. My husband's looking to like ramp down a little bit and maybe
Mhm.
come home and try and relax a little more, and not having to spend the entire weekend, picking up after the animals, maintaining the yard. We've got turtle ponds, fish ponds, all the cages that need to be cleaned, the maintenance on the enclosures. It's a lot. So
Mhm.
we are not necessarily taking in as much as we used to. We kind of feel like we're sort of at our limit. And a lot of these animals, especially the turtles and tortoises, they live a very long time. We
Yeah.
actually need to sit down and make provisions for if something happens to us, where will the animals go?
Right.
Because they'll live over 100 years.
Right.
So, they're going to be here longer than we are. So we need to make sure everything's taken care of. So as far as the animals, we're just kind of going, not actively taking in. If somebody really needs help with something and we can't take it in,
Yeah.
we will put them in. We know a bunch of rescues.
Yeah.
We will put them in touch with another rescue appropriate for that animal.
Yeah.
And help them, place their animal. So we don't ever leave anybody high and dry. If we can't take it, we help them find somewhere to take the animal.
Gotcha.
As far as quilting, I enjoy the long arm quilting. I'm not like running around handing out. I did at QuiltCon. I handed out some business cards, but I'm not trying to, bury myself with long arm quilting. I'm just letting it kind of
do its thing.
Yeah. And of course, if you want that to be your business and you want to quilt 40 hours a week, get out there, do your marketing and do that. But for me right now, because of the animals, I have to be here. I can't really actively market. So it's just sort of, I think they call it like organic growth.
Yeah.
It's just by word of mouth is what I'm doing. And then the YouTube channel, I just fairly recently just started adding the quilting. I just put up my first quilting tutorials, which originally was just going to be, here's how to make this quilt top. This is the quilt top that's in the tutorial. And it ended up being here's how to quilt it. Here's how you calculate your backing and your binding. And here's how you put on your binding. And, oh, by the way, this is how you load a quilt on a long arm and why we ask you for extra backing fabric. I divided it up into 5 parts so people can watch each part.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of people out there that like the hobbies and don't have it. Like, we don't have a craft store near where we live. There's nothing up here.
Right.
That can't get out, or maybe are in a similar situation where they're a caregiver. They're at home all the time, or they're taking care of animals. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to build out my YouTube channel and try and put tutorials out there and share the craft, grow the channel. It's not monetized.
Right.
Maybe it will be at some point, maybe it won't, but it helps other people learn about crafts and do crafts. And it helps me meet people, because I don't meet people. I walk around the yard all day, talking to animals. So I'd like to continually add to the channel. And I've been very lucky. I was very concerned because it was primarily cross stitch. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start. I've been warning people the past couple of cross stitch videos. It's coming. I'm going to be posting different.
Yeah.
I did lose probably about 10 subscribers, but it goes this way and this way.
Yeah.
And it just goes back and forth, and it's kind of at a steady state.
A steady slate at that point. Yeah. No, so, I can understand that.
Yeah. I'm going to continue to add those crafts and hopefully help people and, just share with everybody, because not everybody like I said, not everybody has time to go somewhere and sit down and take a class, or has a great quilt shop up the road like Linda's that they can go to and they can take a class. The closest quilt shop to me is probably 45 minutes away. There's there's not a lot in this particular area. And there are in like Metro Phoenix and other parts of the valley, but just not where we live. They're not nearby.
Right.
Well, try to make crafting accessible to everybody, because that's how I've learned. So I've taken a lot learning from other people. So it's sort of like giving back, and okay, here's what I learned and here's how I do things. And if you ever watch my tutorials, chances are I'll make a mistake, which did happen in my quilt binding video. And some of I'm putting something together, said, oh, well, you know what? I actually did that upside down. Don't do this.
Don't do it that way. But it is, but it is what it is. It makes you human. It shows that, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Right. There's no point. I mean, we're not the quilt police. I don't like the quilt police. Yeah. And we're just here to have a good time and learn and give back. Like you said, that was a big thing that I heard was give back.
Absolutely.
Everything that you've done. So we mentioned briefly at the beginning of the podcast, but we've been chatting for quite some time. Yep. Can you give yourself another plug where for listeners or viewers that are wanting to learn more about the sanctuary, learn more about you, follow you on Instagram? What are kind of those key handles, those websites that people can log on to and follow you?
Okay. I wrote them down. I always have a list in front of me. So if you're on Instagram, I have 2 Instagrams. The animals are AZ Family Zoo, and that's AZ Family Zoo, all one word. And I will say really quick, My animal page is animals. My craft page is crafts. That's what it is. There is nothing else. It is happy, friendly, family friendly. And if somebody leaves something snarky or potty mouth, it's going to get deleted. They're going to get blocked.
Fair.
So, yeah, I keep it to those things because that's what it's for. We all need an escape. We need somewhere happy and friendly to be. And that's what they're for. So, the animals are AZ Family Zoo on Instagram. My Instagram is Mrs. MRS and then the little underscore
Mhm.
AZ Family Zoo. And in both my Instagrams, there's a clickable link to send you to the other Instagram.
Oh, lovely.
So yeah, it makes it easy. And the website is azfamilyzoo.com. And on azfamilyzoo.com, on the bottom, there's also links to the Instagram and the YouTube. And I do have a Pinterest, but I really don't use it that much, but it's there, you know. So let's see. So we did that. Oh, and the YouTube is Mrs. AZ Family Zoo Stitches. That's also linked on my Instagram as well. And for people who don't do Instagram, my accounts are public. So if you go to Google and you type in AZ Family Zoo Instagram or Mrs. AZ Family Zoo Instagram, it comes up and you can look at the Instagram. You can look at anybody's Instagram who's public on your computer.
Right. So you don't have to, yeah, so you don't have to have
And
an account.
email if people want to email me.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, azfamilyzoo@gmail.com.
Cool. Well, there's multiple different ways right there to get in touch with you. And I'll make sure to also have those linked in the description below. So anyone can
Thanks.
just click on them in the YouTube link or Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music. This podcast goes everywhere.
Wow.
So all the different places that that people can get in contact with you and learn more about all the amazing things that you're doing.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. I feel like I've looked at all your podcasts and listened to them. I feel like I'm this like little tiny goldfish in this big giant pond with all these like big important fish. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
You are so welcome. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. Everyone is a big, giant goldfish here at the round table. I like to hear from all sorts of different experiences because you never know. We talked about it earlier. Like you never know what someone might bring to the table that can help change someone else's outlook on life, their trajectory on life, their quilting, their sewing, their crafting, like all those different things. And I don't think that like just because you're not quote unquote a big name person doesn't mean like you shouldn't have the same opportunities as everybody else. So like I love bringing people on here that are just starting their social presence
Mhm.
because they have a story too.
Right.
And to learn about it from everybody is absolutely incredible. So thank you for taking the time out to speak with us. And I can't wait to see what you do in the
Thanks.
future.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Alrighty, everyone. That was my incredible episode with Allison from AZ Family Zoo. We learned so much about everything that she has got going on at the animal sanctuary within all of her multiple different crafting ventures that she's got. She's going so many amazing things. Make sure you follow her on Instagram. Again, that will be linked below. Hop over and learn more about the animals, the sanctuary, all sorts of other fun things. And I will see you here for another episode of Crafters Roundtable next time. Bye, guys.